So tonight, as we commemorate the Last Supper, as Father Ben mentioned, we celebrate the Eucharist and the institution of the priesthood, as well as service to one another. And so as I was reflecting on my years of priesthood, a couple of thoughts came to mind. Was when I was about to celebrate my 20th anniversary about 5.5 years ago, I was planning a little pilgrimage to Rome. I've never been to Rome, and so I thought that would be a good thing to do on my 20th anniversary. And so I was going to go with a few family members, so just 4 of us, do a little private pilgrimage / vacation, that kind of thing. And I was going around claiming that it was a miracle that I was making it to 20 years, right? So I had to really celebrate it in a big way. And, I wasn't only joking. It was meant to be funny that it was a miracle, but the priesthood has been far more challenging, and there's been some, more difficulties than I had expected. And so, we planned this wonderful highlight of going to Rome. Meanwhile, one of my nieces decided she was going to get married right around that time of year. So instead of going to Rome, I made a pilgrimage to Hinton, Alberta. I don't think it's the same, but what do I know? I haven't been to Rome, right? So maybe it's the same. So as a few years passed by, we started planning another pilgrimage, and we said, well, let's just go big or go home for your 25th, right? For my 25th, let's go to Israel, to the Holy Land, because we bumped into several people who told us they'd been to the Holy Land, and just how outstanding of a pilgrimage that was, how the scriptures came alive, and they're like, it would be a great thing for you to do on your 25th. So we started planning that, and then this thing called COVID happened. So that was last October. That didn't happen. So you'll be happy to know I'm not planning anything for my 30th, right? Like, I'm not going anywhere. But we'll see. We'll just take it as it comes, because none of us knows what life is going to bring us, right? We just don't know what life is going to throw at us. And perhaps you can relate, perhaps in your own life, in your vocation. There's been more struggles and challenges, that have come your way than you could have imagined or were expecting, or maybe it didn't turn out as you had planned. And perhaps there's some of you here tonight listening and going, I don't know what you're talking about. My vocation has been bliss, right? There hasn't been any issues, no problems, no challenges. Life has been sunshine and roses from start to finish. Well, just know you're in a minority of people, right? We all have things that come up in life, challenges and difficulties and that kind of thing. So we just never know what life is going to throw at us. But we can always know in faith that Jesus is present with us in whatever life throws at us, that Jesus is present with us always, and in particular, we focus tonight on how he is present to us in the Eucharist. Soon after the Last Supper, Jesus left his disciples, right? In his human presence, he was no longer with them, but he continued to be present to them. And again, Jesus is always present to us, right? He is God. If Jesus would stop being present to us, we would cease to exist, right? We would be less than vapor. We would vanish without his willing it and his presence, because he is God. And Jesus is always present to us, as we know, through our baptism, that he is present through the indwelling of the Holy Spirit within us, always there with us. And also Jesus is present to us in the gift of the Eucharist. Right? The Eucharist is the sacrament of Christ's presence, real, holy, true presence with us, right? The Last Supper came and went, right? But the Eucharist is not Christ's absence that we celebrate. It is his presence with us. And when we celebrate the gift of his loving service through the Eucharist, again, regardless of what life throws at us, his presence is with us. You know, I've heard from various parishioners over the years of when they've gone through really difficult times in their life. And for some, they said something like this, you know, it's just like, I just couldn't come to Mass, right? I was just too emotionally fragile. Like, I would have just cried through the whole Mass. And I didn't want to be, you know, to have to interact with people and people ask me, how are you? How are you doing? You know, that would just open up the floodgates, and I just couldn't face that. Understandable, right? When you're in a very difficult situations of life, that's understandable. But I've also heard, and in particular, this one lady who said during her difficult period, went on several months, I have to come to Mass, right? I had to come to the Eucharist. And she said, and I mostly cried through the whole Mass. You know, I didn't hear much of the homily or the prayers because I was just so emotionally broken. In fact, she snuck in and out of Mass, you know, keeping her head down, not giving eye contact to anyone. But she came. She said, I had to come to Mass, right? Jesus' presence is here, and she needed his presence, and so she came. I was so inspired when I heard that, right? I just so very inspired. But also, I recognized that, yeah, in some of my difficult stretches, you know, when I too was celebrating Mass and I wasn't very focused, you know, like I was distracted by the issues pressing in and all that kind of thing. I didn't feel Jesus' presence, and I certainly wasn't very present to him and all of that, but there was grace. There was a grace of his presence. Even if I wasn't feeling it in the moment, after the fact, there was a lingering grace. And at the very least, I was reminded of his love. I was reminded of his loving presence, of his real, true, abiding presence in the Eucharist at every Mass. In our gospel, Jesus gives us the example of service. And as he's washing the disciples' feet, he comes to Peter, and Peter objects, and Jesus says to him, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Jesus' example of service was not only serving the physical needs and an example for you and I to serve each other, our physical needs, but it was an example of his self-giving, of his selflessness. On Sunday, I talked about that Jesus emptied himself. He was empty of self-will and selfishness and self-centeredness. And so his service was unto suffering and dying on the cross, but his service was also the offering of himself, of his self-offering in the Eucharist. Right? That this selflessness, his selfless service to us, was to remain present with us in the Eucharist. And so as we approach the Eucharist, we approach it with great gratitude. And we come to celebrate Mass and to receive the Eucharist with gratitude. It's just such a great gift of Jesus' loving presence. But also it's a reminder for us that we're called to imitate him, that we're called to be self-emptied, to be emptied of our self-will, of our selfishness, of our self-centeredness, so that we can move towards being a selfless like him. And we'll never get there without his help. Right? We'll never get there without his selfless love at work in us. And we'll never get to this selfless service in imitation of him without receiving the Eucharist in faith. So again, we come tonight with grateful hearts to celebrate the Eucharist, the sacrament that celebrates Jesus' real and holy presence with us, and that we can know in faith his presence here with us, regardless of what life is bringing us today.